Hey everybody, this is Ryan Mallory with SharePlanner.com's Swing Trade in the Stock Market. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about when to sell my stock, when to take profits on a trade. And it's a very unique situation to where you ride the stock down, you're taking a lot of losses, and then you say to yourself, if I can just get back to break even, I'll get out of the stock. But then instead of getting out at break even, which most people don't do, they actually keep riding it higher, and all of a sudden they have a lot of profits, and they're worried about the bigger move. They've forgotten the fact that they were way under on the stock and instead just focused on what might be going forward. And we have that right now going on with Bitcoin. So today's email comes from a guy who is in the Bitcoin stock right now, and he's trying to figure out what to do because he's been in it for a while. He's been underwater on it for a while, and now he's sitting on a lot of profits. And instead of getting out at break even like he had originally promised himself, he's letting it continue to ride. So is he doing the right thing there? Is he doing the wrong thing? That's what we're going to get into on this particular podcast episode. So instead of using his real name, I'm going to give him a Florida redneck name, a good old name of Phyllis. Phyllis is a good Florida redneck name. Why do I use the redneck names? I grew up in Florida. I don't want to use their real identities just because they may not want their name out there 10 years from now. So I try to conceal it for them and don't want to use their real identities. That's pretty much what it comes down to. So for this email, Phyllis writes, "Hey Ryan, love the podcast and I've listened to probably about 80% of all the episodes so far. Right now, I'm in one of the wildest trades I've ever participated in. I jumped in Bitcoin at 69,000 in June. Yeah, I know, perfect timing, right? Watched it tank down to 48,000 in August, and now post-election, it is sitting pretty good at 93,000. I did a horrible job of managing the risk, I would say. Having my struggle here explained to you, back when I was underwater, I kept telling myself, just get back to break even and I'll sell out. But now I'm watching this climb higher day after day, and that old promise I made to myself is like a distant memory now. Every time I hover over that sell button, I get hit with the fear that I'll be the guy who sold Bitcoin right before it really mooned. The rational part of me knows that I should take profits, but there's this voice in my head saying, what if this is life-changing move that everyone talks about? I'm up way more than I ever thought I would be, but somehow that's making it harder to sell, not easier. Could really use some perspective on this, especially when the risk management has been such a disaster. Thanks for all the wisdom. Sincerely, Phyllis. P.S. Never thought I'd be stressed about making too much money, but here we are. It's so funny how the more money you make on a trade, the harder it is. You say to yourself, okay, if I had a stock go from $100 to $200 a share, it would be a no-brainer. Man, what would I be upset about? What would I be stressed about? I'm up 100%. But when you find yourself in that situation, it's not that simple. You go from $100 a share to $200 a share, and all of a sudden you're thinking, does it go to 300, 400? What if I'm on the cusp of something very, very special here and I can't afford to get out? I mean, anytime I've been up really big on a trade, that's the first thing that goes through my mind. So clearly Phyllis is using no risk management. He let the stock go from, he says here, what was it, about 69,000? Yeah, 69,000 all the way down to 48,000. So that's a $21,000 drop, assuming that he bought one Bitcoin. Probably didn't buy one Bitcoin, probably far less than that. But if he did buy one Bitcoin, that $69,000 position went down to $48,000. And then it goes back up to 69,000, which is where he said he would get out at. But instead, it's like, okay, let's see how far this one wants to run. And it really has mooned. I mean, it's gone from that breakout level of around 68,000. I've been trading in a channel going back to like March of this year. It was a long channel, had a slight decline to it. And then in August, the floor fell out from underneath it, and then it rallied off of the lows to be able to stay inside of that channel, even though intraday on August 5th, it broke below it. And then it continued to trade sideways for a few more months. And then obviously we know what happened post-election. Trump gets elected, and then this stock, or not the stock, it's the crypto just goes straight up. I mean, it was already showing some signs of wanting to do it beforehand, but right before the election, it pulls back. What was it, about like down to like 67, 787 there? That was on trying to find the date here. Oh, 11/4/24. So yeah, right before the election, pulls back to that $68,000 mark, and then it was like a perfect pullback of the breakout level, which is what a lot of breakouts will do. Actually, they'll pull back to the breakout level that they initially broke out of. It'll retest it, see if it can hold, and if it does, then it gets a strong bounce to the upside. So that's exactly what we've gone here with Bitcoin. It's just gone straight to the moon, essentially. I mean, exactly what he's talking about here. He's afraid of that happening. It's already happened. Whether it goes higher here, nobody really knows. But the move going from like 67 to 92, 93,000 in just a matter of like a little over a week, it's been incredible. So one of the options that the person has is taking partial profits. I'm not sure why he doesn't, but he could easily do that here and say, okay, I've made a good chunk of money here. Maybe I just sell the profits and go back down to my original position size. I mean, if you get in at 67,000, 68,000, and then it goes up to 92, 93,000, you've made like over 20% there. You can sell a good chunk of your profits there. Let's say if you only, put in $10,000 in it. I mean, I shouldn't say only. That's still a lot of money. If you put $10,000 into it, and it goes up, from this move here, it goes up to like, 13, 14,000, essentially like a 30% move. You can take the profits off, and at least you've taken a good chunk of your exposure off the table. Or you can even go further than that and take more of your overall position off the table. Maybe instead of it having like a $13,000 position, from where you got in with about a $10,000 position, you knock it down to like maybe $7,000, and essentially you're almost cutting your position in half, but still having 70% of your original. So there's a lot of things that he could do here, taking some profits off the table when your emotions get high. And here's the thing too: when people are writing the show, their emotions are usually pretty high at that point. Their emotions aren't really chill because they're writing the show. There's emotions. There's a lot of confusion sometimes. That's usually a good indication they got a lot of emotions for the trade. It's taking some profits. When you do that, it does take some emotions off the table. I get it that, you may be worried about, well, what if it continues to go higher? I'd still like to be able to benefit from the whole position. But here's the other thing that I would say is that one trade, when it comes to trading, one trade should not make up your entire success story as a trader. If you're going to be a successful trader, it's not going to come down to one trade. It's going to come down to a history of making good trades. On the flip side, you can have a history of bad trades or just one trade that defines you. So a successful trading career will be defined by many trades, by not just one, but by many, because you've had a history of making good calls, good decisions, you manage the risk appropriately. A bad trading career can be defined by one trade, and that's what you don't want to have happen to you. But here he's worried about it mooning. It's already mooned for the most. I mean, you go from 68,000 to 92,000. Everybody and their mom right now is talking about Bitcoin and whether or not they're in it. At that point, you have to realize there's a lot of euphoria already in the stock. So again, it comes down to you had a good trade here. In terms of results, I think the risk management was horrible. I wouldn't recommend it, but overall, it was a successful trade. Some other thoughts. Put a Bollinger Band on this sucker right now. If you put a Bollinger Band over the Bitcoin, it is way, way outside of the Bollinger Band. I mean, it's way outside. It's been running like 4 days hot. So a lot of times when it gets, and for those who don't know what it is, most people will refer to it as being like a 2 standard deviations off of the 20-day moving average, right? So price is 2 standard deviations off of what the 20-day moving average has been. That is a significant move right there. And when price gets outside the upper Bollinger Band, there tends to be a little bit of a reversion to the mean there. So if that happens, yes, it can run outside of it, but typically is what I'm talking about. If it pulls back, do you really want to be holding a stock that goes back from 93,000? Let's say it comes back down to just break even where you originally got in at. You're going to be hating yourself. The amount of torment you will cause yourself if Bitcoin comes right back down again is going to be substantial. You will be extremely angry. And so you want to avoid that. You want to think about the emotions that goes along with your trades. You don't want to be taking massive losses or even losing massive profits because you didn't manage the risk or because you got too greedy. Here's the other thing about the Bitcoin breakout. It got almost to 3 standard deviations out. When it gets to 3 standard deviations, it's almost guaranteed that it's going to pull back at that point. And it's a very rare occurrence. But when it does happen, it's pretty significant. So keep that in mind. And the history of Bitcoin is pretty wild in itself. I mean, I'm looking at a chart here. You don't have to, but just looking at some of these moves. I mean, you go back to... Let's just go back to 2020. This was trading at 9,000. It goes all the way up to 64,000. It was a pretty good moonshot. If you see a similar move like that here, yeah, that would be, well, that would essentially like take it to, I don't know, what would it be, like $600 something dollars? I mean, that would be a massive move. So, or no, would it be? No, it'd probably be like 360,000. So you have that spectacular move initially. That was when it was still on people's radar, but not like it is now. It goes from 65,000, 66,000 back down to 28,000. So that's a pretty big move there. You're losing over half the value. Then it goes from, the 28,000 mark, and within a few months, it's back up to 69,000. Then it crashes all the way down. Over the course of the next year, it goes back down to 15,000, where it starts to base. Breaks back out again over the course of 2023. It runs back up to 74,000. So there's some pretty big moves and pretty big pullbacks too. We've yet to see it have a dramatic move and not pull back. Okay, so the chances that this move here, where it's gone from 67, 68,000 all the way up to 93, almost 94,000, and there's not going to be a pullback of some kind. And if there's a pullback, you can take that same money that you made and buy more Bitcoin because you're buying at a lower price than where you got out at. So I have a whole lot to say about this, guys. But one thing I would tell you is make sure to check out swingtradingthestockmarket.com, or you can just go to shareplanner.com and you can get a look at all the different services offered to you there. With it, you can get all my stock market research, and that's going to include daily videos, not only just my watch lists and the stocks that I'm looking to potentially trade, but I also review the watch lists each day and tell you, okay, this is what's working, this is what's not working, this is how I'm approaching this particular trade setup. I also send out a master watch list at the beginning of each week, a bullish and bearish one, that show you where I'm going to be getting my trade setups from. Plus, on top of that, I do mega cap updates and overall stock market updates as well. So all video format, really cool stuff, really good way to know what I'm thinking on the markets on a daily basis. And in the process, you're supporting this podcast, which I'm trying to do videos again for. I haven't done them in the past much, but I'm trying to give it another run. I think sometimes I got to kind of sometimes ignore the camera, because then I feel like I'm just talking to the camera and it feels more like a YouTube video. So I have the camera on, but I'm not really paying too much attention. So hopefully that doesn't weird you out at all. But so, like I said, you've had this big move in Bitcoin, likely to do it again. You have the Bollinger Bands, you overlay them, you can see it's overextended. And the fact that you're feeling like this, where you're talking to yourself and saying, okay, what if this is the beginning of something big? Usually when I start thinking about how much money that I can make on a trade, like let's say on this Bitcoin trade, I take it from 69 to 93,000. Like, oh man, what if it goes to 200 now? And when I start thinking like that, that's usually a bad sign for me. That's usually that I'm getting irrational, that I'm not focused or thinking about the risk. I'm just thinking about how much money I can make. And I talk about that from a dollar watching standpoint. When you start dollar watching, you're thinking about, oh, if the stock does this or if it does that, and I can get this kind of money, then I can buy that, or I can, pay for the mortgage, or I can pay off a car, or I don't know. What do people like? I can go, for me, it would be, hey, maybe I'll go use it for a fancy pizza oven. I love upgrading my pizza oven. I actually have a pretty good pizza oven right now, but the Gosney, those are pretty sweet. Let's see here. What else do we have to talk about? It's so easy, and this is one thing I would try to say too. It's very easy for traders to get caught into this. You get into a trade, you show a lack of risk management. You're not using stop losses. In this case, buying at 69,000, watching it go down on August 5th as low as like 48,000. So you're taking a substantial loss at that point. Could have been a lot less if you would have just managed the risk. And ultimately, you could have played the breakout again because it was in this channel for the better part of 2024. You could have played it right, not only when it first initially broke out, but you could have played it again when it retested that breakout level and moved higher from there. So you could have played it on both occasions. But instead, you used a lot of resources mentally watching the stock go from 68, 69 down to 48, and then you're telling yourself, no, when it comes back to 68, 69, I'm going to go ahead and get out of the trade. But of course, you don't do that. So you're showing, even though it turned out good for you, you're showing a lack of discipline on both ends of the trade. I don't like the whole idea if I can just get out at break even. That I think that's a lazy approach to trading. I think that one, you plan your trade before you ever get into it. You make sure you know where you're going to put your stop losses before you ever get into it, and you may manage your trade accordingly. If you get stopped out, you honor that stop loss and you get out. You don't move it down lower. You don't ignore it. You get out. But anytime you say you're going to get back out at break even, guaranteed that if it goes back up to break even, you're not getting out at break even. And then here's where it gets kind of like complicated and weird. It gets back up to break even, and let's say you do take the profits. And then you watch what happened thereafter on Bitcoin. Then you stayed in this trade thinking that it was going to go higher when you initially got in at 69. It goes down to 48, and then you say, okay, I'm going to get out if it gets back to 69. You get out at 69. And then a few days later, it's trading at 93. And you just spent 7-8 months in this trade. Actually, I think he said he got into it at June, right? Okay, so it's like 5 or 6 months. But it had been in this channel since essentially going back to March. So that's about 8 months. So you've been in this trade all this time, been underwater 95% of the time. Actually, almost 100% of the time based off of when he got into it. And then it gets back to break even, you get out, and then you see it go straight up. So then what do you think you're going to do the next time? Well, I'm not getting out at break even. And then the next time happens, you'll wish that you did get out at break even because it goes right back down again. You see how being undisciplined in your trading can wreak havoc on your mind? Because if this was me and I had gotten back out at break even and then it balloons to 93,000, I would be irate, incredibly irate. Probably as irate as I was when I got stopped out of LinkedIn the day before they got bought out. And yes, that is a true story. But I was disciplined at least in that, and I could look back on them and say, yeah, I missed out on a 60% move, but I was disciplined. And I sound a little salty about it. I am. It was like, 10 years ago, or I don't know. How long did Microsoft get bought out by LinkedIn? I think it was like, maybe not 10 years, maybe it was like 7 or 8 years ago. But yeah, I'm still a little salty about that. Think about this too. Why is Bitcoin going up? Obviously, it's made its move post-election. Trump won the election, and stocks like Bitcoin, or not stocks, cryptos like Bitcoin, stocks like Tesla, they're all moonshotting. I think Tesla went up since October 23rd, something like 61%. I don't think they're necessarily selling more cars as a result. If anything, there's a potential that there could be a blowback on Tesla, that people who are into EVs may not like the fact that he's gotten so involved in politics. And as a result, they're not going to buy Tesla. Maybe they'll buy Rivian or something from a car standpoint, an EV car standpoint. And that could hurt the stock. But it's running right now because Trump won the election. So I think there's a little bit of a euphoria there, a misplaced euphoria, just like with Bitcoin. If anything, I would say there could be a little bit of a misplaced hope in Bitcoin right now. Just like I explained in Tesla, everybody's like, okay, Elon, is closely aligned with Bitcoin or with Trump, and that's going to be good for the stock, but it may not. It may alienate some of the customer base. On the flip side, people who were buying Bitcoin might have felt that if Harris had won, that the dollar might have deteriorated further, or that we were going to continue spending. Now, there's like this Department of Government Efficiency and so forth, to where if they actually do get the House's matters in order and they can cut spending and they can get closer to a balanced budget, that might actually hurt Bitcoin. So there's a lot of scenarios there that you have to consider, and assuming that it's just going to moonshot go to $1 million a coin, it's not going to likely happen in the here or now. I don't want to say ever, because there is some pretty wild runs that Bitcoin has made, but just taking the odds standpoint, I personally, if I was as low as 48 and now I'm looking at almost double that at 93, yeah, it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and close out that trade there, or at least take some profits off the board. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, I would encourage you to, if you're listening to it on YouTube, like and subscribe, or whatever platform you're listening to it on, Spotify or Apple. Leave me a 5-star review. I greatly appreciate those, and they do mean the world to me. Plus, keep sending me your questions. Ryan at SharePlanner.com. I do read all of those, and I appreciate hearing your stories. I want to hear what you're dealing with, what you're struggling with, and I want to get that from you guys and be able to answer your questions. So send them to me. I'm the only person that reads them. Nobody else is going to read them, and I'll keep your name anonymous as well. Plus, check out SharePlanner.com. That's a great way to support this podcast. If you like what I'm hearing, you want to get a little bit more from a daily standpoint, go to SharePlanner.com. Thank you guys, and God bless. Thanks for listening to my podcast, Swing Trading the Stock Market. I'd like to encourage you to join me in the SharePlanner trading block, where I navigate the stock market each day with traders from around the world